In the early morning, Oliver and his friends observed some students practicing broomstick flying for a competition. Nana felt concerned when she saw a student fall during practice, but Michaela reassured her that someone was ready to catch them below. This piqued Nana's interest, and she decided to give it a try as well. Michaela was confident that Nana would be a good fit for broomstick flying since she had tamed a wild broomstick not too long ago. Suddenly, a student in disheveled attire approached them. He introduced himself as Tullio Rossi, a fellow first-year student. Tullio stated that Oliver and the others didn't need to introduce themselves because they were too conspicuous. Most people already knew who they were. And indeed, he knew their names without any formal introductions. After a brief chat, he excused himself to go to class ahead of them. Their first class of the day was magical swordsmanship. Currently, they were holding a sparring session among the students. As usual, Oliver easily defeated his opponent. Next, Master Garland called Pete and Tullio for a sparring match. For some reason, Pete seemed upset when he learned he had to face Tullio. He didn't even pay attention to Oliver, who was trying to encourage him. Naturally, Oliver was worried because Pete was already emotional before starting the match. When the sparring session began, Pete rushed to attack Tullio. As a result, Tullio managed to trip Pete and end the match in an instant. Master Garland advised Pete not to rush and to broaden his perspective. Pete had already resigned to his defeat, but he became furious when Tullio called him milady. Pete was shocked, wondering if Tullio knew about his reversey condition. However, what Tullio meant was that Pete was always protected by his friends like a lady. Tullio said that someone like that would never grow stronger. After class, Pete immediately told his friends that he wanted special training. Until now, Pete had been practicing on his own as best as he could, but the gap in his abilities was widening compared to other students. Moreover, in their next meeting, they would be learning a new spell. Oliver and Michaela agreed to help him. Michaela wanted to teach him until he became an expert in the Rise-It sword style. Oliver strongly disagreed and suggested the Lanoff style instead. Because of this, they started arguing about which style should be taught to Pete. Guy informed Nana that this was one of the 3 hottest debate topics in the world of magic. Witches continued to debate which of the 3 styles was the most powerful. Seeing them argue, Nana offered to teach Pete her swordsmanship skills. Suddenly, Oliver and Michaela both rejected her proposal at the same time. Guy then suggested that Oliver and Michaela split the task. Michaela would teach the offensive part, while Oliver would handle the defensive part. Eventually, they agreed on this approach. After that, Pete began his training with Oliver. Oliver asked what Pete would do when an opponent was in very close range. Pete answered that he would attack with his sword. Then, Oliver stepped back to a sufficient distance and asked Pete the same question again. Pete replied that he would use a spell to attack. Next, Pete advanced a few steps until he was in a middle-range position. Pete was unsure of what to do when the opponent was at that distance. Oliver then asked Pete to attack him seriously from where he stood. Pete immediately drew his sword to use the Tonitrus spell, but Oliver was quicker and aimed his sword at Pete's neck. Oliver explained that the first condition for victory was to have the upper hand in a theme. However, Pete's mistake was making a wrong decision at an ambiguous range. Distinguishing the distance from the opponent is also a crucial requirement for winning. Meanwhile, Tullio secretly observed their training. During the cafeteria break, Pete recalled the lessons he had learned from their practice. Suddenly, Tullio approached him and offered to be Pete's mentor if he wanted to become stronger. Tullio believed he had a more practical approach than Oliver. Michaela didn't like Tullio's sudden intrusion, but he explained that he was doing this because Oliver and his friends were too conspicuous, making other students seem like side characters. Tullio said that this was the perfect time to determine the strongest student in their year. He invited other students who felt they were the strongest to join a competition. One of the students who wanted to participate was Stacy. Her servant, Faye, couldn't believe Stacy wanted to join, especially since she was so scared during the Garuda incident. So Faye decided to participate as well out of concern for Stacy. Of course, Nanao eagerly joined too. To satisfy Tullio, Oliver finally agreed to participate as well, as did Michelle. After that, Tullio explained the details of the competition procedure. The winner would be determined by the number of medals each student possessed. The losers would have to give one medal to the winner. If they ran out of medals, they would be eliminated. 1 week from now, the 4 students with the most medals would compete in the final round. Without hesitation, a female student immediately challenged Nanao. She was Evelyn, often referred to as quick-tongue. While her spells and aim were mediocre, she was incredibly fast at reciting spells. Afterward, they moved to an open area for their duel. Following Academy protocol, they recited the Securus spell first. Evelyn knew that Nanao was still a novice in magic, and she was confident she could win as long as she kept her distance. Oliver understood the tactic Evelyn was planning. From the perspective of others, Nanao might seem disadvantaged. However, Oliver knew that Nanao's swordsmanship skills were far superior. When the match began, Evelyn immediately used the impetus spell. However, Nanao was able to deflect it to the side, just like when she faced Farah before. From there, Nanao quickly closed the gap and disarmed Evelyn. As a result, Nanao was declared the winner. After the match, Michaela promised that she would make it to the finals. Therefore, she asked Oliver and Nanao to also make it to the end so they could have a fair fight. Michaela hadn't felt this excited in a long time. Later in the afternoon, Oliver resumed Pete's training. According to Oliver, Pete was quick at learning and had started to understand how to distinguish distances. After that, Pete excused himself, feeling very tired. Shortly after, Oliver sensed someone's presence, specifically Teresa. She came to inform Oliver that Shannon and Gwen had invited him for tea. Then Oliver had to navigate the labyrinth to reach his destination. There, he accidentally ran into Ophelia. Oliver immediately went on guard when he saw her. However, Ophelia assured him that she had no ill intentions. Instead, she asked Oliver to chat with her for a moment. Oliver knew a little about Ophelia's background. She had been living in the labyrinth since one day. It turned out Ophelia had mentioned returning to the academy a few times, especially to eat pumpkin pie in the cafeteria. Ophelia also knew some information about the incidents experienced by Oliver and his friends. She also felt that the student council president, Godfrey, resembled Oliver and the others. When they were first years, Godfrey used to frequent the labyrinth to face dangers. Ophelia often accompanied him with Carlos. Afterward, Ophelia thanked Oliver for keeping her company in the conversation. Before leaving, she suddenly touched Oliver's chin and advised him not to wander in the labyrinth too often, especially for the next few months. Finally, Oliver arrived at the place where Shannon and Gwen were. Oliver remembered meeting Gwen when he accompanied Pete the other day. Carlos wasn't an ally in their plan, but Gwen had been friends with him for a long time. While having tea together, Oliver mentioned his encounter with Ophelia on the way there. For some reason, Shannon immediately inquired about Ophelia's whereabouts to chase after her, but Gwen promptly stopped her. Gwen informed Oliver that Shannon had been friends with Ophelia for a long time. Shannon knew that Ophelia was prone to loneliness, so she wanted to be with her whenever possible. Putting that aside, Gwen wanted to know if Nanao was indeed a user of the 7th spellblade. Even though Oliver was just a borrowed spellblade user, he felt a connection with Nanao. Moreover, his mother's broom also acknowledged Nanao. Unconsciously, Oliver couldn't divert his attention from Nanao. Gwen believed that the girl would bring significant changes to Oliver's life. After tea, Oliver felt he was being followed on the way back. Oliver intentionally led the pursuer to an open area and asked the person to come out of hiding. As suspected, it was Tullio. Oliver wanted to know why Tullio was fixated on him. Tullio claimed that he just didn't like Oliver being more conspicuous than him. However, Oliver felt that Nanao was even more conspicuous than he was. Tullio said that Nanao was an exception because she was cute. Afterward, Tullio proposed a duel with the rule of no magic allowed, and the Secura spell was only set at half power. Oliver surprisingly agreed. Before starting, Tullio pretended to forget something. Then, suddenly, he closed the distance to attack. Tullio's fighting style appeared to be quite barbaric, unlike any particular martial art. In contrast, Oliver executed Lanoff techniques flawlessly. Tullio even used the metal in his glove to block, body check, punch, and trip Oliver. Despite repeatedly taking punches to the face, Oliver managed to hold his own. Later, Oliver thanked Tullio for making him realize his lack of experience. However, Oliver stated that he would win within 8 attacks. Midway through the fight, Oliver successfully caught Tullio's hand. It was rare for swordsmen from the 3 schools to use punching techniques. In close combat, it was more effective to catch an opponent's hand when they were off guard rather than punching. Just as Oliver predicted, he won within 8 attacks. As he had lost, Tullio gave one of his medals to Oliver. Before leaving, Oliver suggested that Tullio should consider studying one of the sword styles. He felt that Tullio had remarkable talent and improvisational skills, while Oliver merely followed techniques from books. Nonetheless, Tullio believed that Oliver trained relentlessly until his movements were just like those in the books. Upon returning to the academy, Oliver encountered Teresa, who congratulated him. Uncharacteristically, for some reason, Teresa also blurted out something that left her embarrassed. Meanwhile, Tullio, who was still in the labyrinth, met another first-year student participating in the competition. The student intended to duel with Tullio,